Hello and welcome again to Unstaged with Dave Nystrom. I'm Dave Nystrom, and today I've got with me a special guest. He's known as the Anxiety MD. He's a professional stand-up comedian. He's a medical doctor, and I just know him as my good friend, Dr. Russ Kennedy. How you doing, Russ?
Hey, Dave. Good to be here. I'm great.
That's fantastic. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. I know you're a busy man, especially during times like this when there's a lot going on for people. Can you tell me a little bit, so people know a little bit about your history?
Well, my history is I was a medical doctor. I actually left practice about 5 years ago because I wanted to specialize in helping people with anxiety. And because my methods are a little atypical for your basic allopathic medical doctor, I kind of had to leave the profession to be able to do the kind of work that I do now. So, I think psychiatry and medicine has a lot to offer, but I also think they have a fair amount of limitations in the way they treat people, especially with mental illness. And I don't think a lot of doctors really understand mental illness. And I grew up with a schizophrenic father. So it was one of those things where it was like, this is kind of my calling to be able to help other people with mental issues. Because, I've had an anxiety issue my whole life. So I've been able to kind of fix that for the most part, and I just want to share that with other people because it is a very atypical format that I use to help people.
So, just sort of carry me along a little bit on the journey that took you from medical doctor to specializing now in is it just anxiety that you specialize in?
Well, I have a degree in neuroscience as well as medicine, so. But I've really spent the last probably 10 years really analyzing human behavior and how much anxiety plays a role in addiction, issues with, relationship problems. So anxiety is kind of like the umbrella that I deal with, but usually, it manifests in different ways. So some people it's addiction, they're addicted to alcohol. With some people, they're addicted to shopping or porn or, anything that sort of distracts them from this alarm that they're carrying in their body. So I think a lot of it is just helping people understand on more of an ethereal point that anxiety and our dysfunctions are much more held in our body than they are in our mind. And I know that that's an atypical way of looking at it, especially from a reductionist kind of medical doctor. So I really get people to focus on where they feel things in their body, and then a lot of times, as weird as it sounds, and sometimes as a medical doctor I want to have a seizure when I say this, but a lot of times when we get stressed, if we really feel our body, we can really find out where the source of that stress comes from. And if we can direct our breath and like a compassionate part of us to that area, it's amazing how much will come out rather than just trying to talk it out, because there's only so much. You're trying to deal with these unconscious emotional programs that are in the mind and the body, and there's only so much access you'll have to them just with words. So I think a lot of times what we do in medicine and psychiatry and psychology is we deal with the nuts and bolts of it from a mental aspect and don't really feel the body as much. My wife is a somatic trauma therapist, so she's studied Peter Levine's work in somatic experiencing, and she's graduated in that. So we talk about how to use the body and the mind. I'm not against talk therapy by any means at all, but I think we need to use a lot more of the body and the healing of the mind, because that's where a lot of these old traumas are stored. So talking only gets to these old traumas in a very tangential or superficial way. And if you go into the body as well as the mind, that's the best chance you've had at healing. And that's what I found has healed me, has been able to do both, is examine things from my mind perspective and also go in through the body as well. But I realize it's a very atypical framework that most, especially medical doctors, don't know about.
Yeah, so you would say that in traditional medical for a traditional medical doctor or a traditional psychologist, it's either all in the mind or they're dealing with all in the body. They're not working with a connection between the two.
Well, typically the doctors and the psychologists are more in the it's all in the mind kind of thing, and that's the way they're trained at universities. They're trained to do therapy as far as that goes because it's replicatable. If you do CBT, you can give somebody a score on an exam when they first come in to see how anxious they are, and at the end of the CBT program, you can go, well, you were 63 when you came in, and now you're only 42, so it must have helped. So when you start going into where do you feel that in your body, and how does that affect you? How does that affect, the way your body reacts to different things, and where is that in your body that you feel that? They can't quantify that, so there's no way of that sort of getting into mainstream kind of psychiatry and psychology. So the psychiatrists and psychologists themselves, more psychologists than psychiatrists get into the body, but it's still not a very common approach, for sure. And now somatic experiencing therapy is getting a lot more press. So we're starting to see a lot more of the traditional practitioners start to accept that, hey, going into the body as well as the mind is really something that helps people heal holistically and not just heal the thoughts. Because if you heal the thoughts are going to come back. But if you heal the source of the problem, which is this old trauma that's locked in the body, those thoughts don't come back because they don't have anything to feed them anymore.
Interesting. Well, and I know you were also not only a doctor, you are an accredited yoga instructor as well as a guided meditation instructor. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I went through a lot of stuff because I think I got really disillusioned with medicine and psychiatry and psychology, and I really had to go out and sort of heal myself. So I wound up doing yoga, becoming a yoga teacher. I did LSD, ayahuasca, psilocybin, MDMA after I was 50 years old. So it wasn't like I wanted to get high on these things, but it really did give me a different framework and a different reference point on what actually was causing my anxiety. And I really found, especially on LSD, that my anxiety was kind of locked in this place in my chest. And then once I really addressed that, when I came out of the LSD and had this message given to me that, hey, your anxiety is much more locked in your body than it is in your mind. And once I got that, I kind of had this idea like, okay, how do I go at this? So I put my hand over that area and sort of, because I had this theory that, that alarm that we have tracked in our body and trapped in there is our younger selves. It's the time that we felt, powerless, because I know I felt really powerless in dealing with my dad when he would go, schizophrenic and psychotic. So it's just a matter of just connecting with that place. And unless I did the psychedelics, I don't think I ever would have seen that different aspect. So I like to say that I know more about anxiety, the understanding anxiety from more perspectives than anyone else in the world, because I have got a degree in neuroscience, a degree in medicine. I am a yoga teacher. I have done MDMA. I did live at a temple in India for a while. Like, I think I've taken this from as many possible perspectives as I possibly can. And then come up with this theory that I'm going to publish in my book and when it comes out in September. And hopefully people can read it and understand where their anxiety really comes from, because it probably isn't coming from your mind.
Interesting. Now, and it seems to be a real surge. I've noticed in the last couple of years where there's a lot more interest in, as you say, the LSD, ayahuasca. I've heard a lot about ayahuasca in the last couple of years, whereas even 5 years ago, I'd never even heard of ayahuasca.
Right.
What do you attribute to the rise of these substances being used as more of, instead of a party drug, as more of a therapeutic drug?
Yeah, well, it started like they're starting to use ketamine, which is kind of like it's a psychedelic in the medical profession, psychiatry. Psychiatry hasn't really grown much in the last 30 years or so, and even before that. So the advancement of being able to use psychedelics, because what psychedelics do is they bypass the ego. And the ego is this protective, in my book right now, I'm writing about this ego is kind of like this dragon that we create in Scandinavian cultures. I got this from Dr. Gordon Neufeld, who's a developmental psychologist, and he always shows this picture of this dragon sitting on top of this treasure chest. And the dragon is kind of your protective ego. So what it does when if you're a child and you're abused, you experience loss or abandonment or you're rejected, this protective dragon comes up. You create this in your mind, and it protects you from that. But it also blocks you from feeling as well. So it's like the ego is kind of like this overprotective mother, right? It doesn't allow you to do anything that once hurt you. So if you put your hand on a hot element, you're never going to do that again. And part of that is your ego saying, hey, don't ever do that again. But with me, when I loved my father, and then he would go, he'd lose his mind, he'd go crazy, and I'd see him suffer with like debilitating depressions and stuff. For me, it came to this point where it's not safe to love. Like that's the message my ego dragon got was, look, it's not safe to love. So that's, staying away from hot elements is great, but if you start having an aversion to love, that's really going to cause some problems in your life, and that's maybe why I've been married 3 times. So it is one of those things that I think we create these dragons when we're younger because we have no other sense of support around us to help us, and then that dragon is kind of like, it's like a one-trick pony. Like it doesn't help you grow. It basically just stops you from experiencing anything that potentially has hurt you in the past. So how are we supposed to, get past our mental illness or our ego unless we do something like psychedelics? So going full circle, that's why psychedelics are used, because what they will do is they'll bypass that dragon. They'll bypass that protective thing, and then you can get into the treasure chest, which I believe, holds your innocence, holds your true self, holds who you really are. Or what you would have really been had you not experienced trauma as a child. And a lot of people haven't experienced trauma as a child. I'm talking, the people I deal with mostly do have some element of trauma. I mean, we all do. Childhood's traumatic. It just is, So that's why I think psychedelics are going to be used more and more, is because, it's really hard to get past that ego because it's such a strong, powerful force. And you created it when you were like 3, 4, 10 years old. And it's been in you for so long that you don't even see it anymore. And that's why I think the LSD was so important for me to actually see, look, this is what's happening. You've got this alarm that's locked in your body. And then you also have this dragon of ego that's protecting it from being, you can't release it because it's trapped in there. And the more it's trapped in there, the more, anxiety symptoms you get in your mind. So it's a matter of like letting the dragon stand down, making friends with the dragon. I call it winning over the dragon, rather than winning over, like defeating it or conquering it. Like win over the dragon so you can say, hey, I can go back to that place of my younger self and say, you know what, I'm going to give you the connection now and allow you to feel that love is safe. We're getting a really sort of deep and ethereal end of the book here, but basically it's just, it's getting to the point where your ego knows that something isn't safe and it won't allow you to do it. And if it doesn't allow you to do it, you'll never heal from it. So you got to feel it to heal it, pretty much. So that was a bit of a rant, but
no, that's fascinating, and I'm curious. In your opinion, and I'd love to read the book when it comes out. Definitely. Are these controlled substances? Like, do you recommend doing them through somebody who has experience? In terms, I'm not talking, the guy who takes lots of LSD and goes to a concert, but somebody who has experience with it and how to control it. Or I've heard a lot about microdosing too.
Yeah, microdosing is one of those things that it's not. See, the thing about psychedelics is it's kind of like an all or nothing thing that sort of bypasses your ego in a big way and allows you to see these revelations. Microdosing will help you kind of bypass the ego, but because you're still like completely in control while you're microdosing, depending on what dose you take, of course, it's not as effective, but it's certainly, I have lots of people that have had lots of revelations on just microdosing as well. And just the point where they can kind of see they get into another framework of life, that it isn't this constant worry or there isn't this constant threat around us. Because I know in the States right now, they're doing what's called stellate ganglion blocks on combat veterans for PTSD. And what that does is they inject the neck, and it blocks the sympathetic, it blocks some of the nervous discharge from the body up into the brain. And what happens is, within 30 to 90 seconds after they get this block, and all the discharge from the body is stopped, they feel like new people. And then they'll go home and their wives and children will say, look, he's playing with us now. He's going out. He's hanging out with the dog. He's laughing. He's coming down for dinner. Like, he's completely different. So it just shows you how much of this negative energy is locked in our bodies, and how much we can sort of access it in a different way. So I think psychedelics are one way we access it. I think like things like stellate ganglion blocks are another way we access it. Breath work, where you're not taking any substance at all. Holotropic breath work by, Stan Grof. He invented that. And I think that's really, really helpful for some people who are afraid of doing psychedelics, and rightly so, because, ayahuasca I've had panic attacks most of my life. And you can multiply my worst panic attack by 100, and it wouldn't even touch ayahuasca. So, that was the most frightening thing, I've ever gone through. So it's not something that I would sort of recommend. It's kind of like a last resort kind of thing. And it was for me, because I was at the end of my rope back in 2013, and I had to do something differently. And that's when I did the LSD and really had this revelation that, hey, you know what, this is another way you can use to heal your anxiety. And since then I have been able to. So
amazing. And one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on during this, I mean, would have had you on regardless, because this is all fascinating. But right now, in the middle of this pandemic, with this lockdown going on, and so much unknown factors out there for people, what would you recommend for people to kind of manage their anxiety and be able to, move forward in a positive way? That's not, because it's stressing me out. It's stressing everybody out.
Absolutely. I think there's this, people hate uncertainty. I think that's one of the things that human beings hate almost the most is uncertainty. So what happens is that we try and make the uncertain certain by worrying about it. Because I think there's, on some level, if we think, oh, what if my grandmother got this or whatever, there is this sort of feeling in this dissonance that occurs in our bodies, this sort of feeling of angst. And we don't like that. So what we'll do is we'll make sense of it. But unfortunately, what we do is we make sense of that by worrying about it, because we think the worry provides some sort of, concrete structure around this dissonance that we feel in our body. And I think it's just, the one thing I would tell people in the short term is, like, ask yourself multiple times a day, where am I? Like, am I in the future? Am I projecting myself into the future? Because basically all worry is future-based. You can't worry about something that is actually happening. You worry about things that aren't happening. So when you realize that you can only worry about something that's not happening, that gives you a measure of power. Realizing that I was taken away into the future there. I have this little ABC process that I use with people, and I call it awareness, body, and compassion. So basically you become aware of what your regular worries are. And we all have our regular worries. I'm a bit of a hypochondriac, so those are my regular worries. I have a friend who's a business person. His worries are all about money. So you become aware of what your tells are. Kind of in poker, you have these tells. And then you become aware of those, and then when you feel those, you make this intention to go into your body. It's like go into your breath, rub your fingertips together, put your hands on your face, rub your cheeks, provided your hands are washed, of course, these days. Because if you look at the neurology of your brain, like most of your real estate for the sensation in your brain is in your hands and your face. So as soon as you touch your hands to your face, your brain kind of gets overwhelmed with this sensation. And what sensation does is it brings you back from the future, and it brings you into that present moment. So when you're in the present moment, you've got some power, you've got some grounding. But if you're off in your head, if you're off in the future, so that's what I tell people. It's like ask yourself multiple times a day, where am I right now? And if you're in the future, bring yourself back into sensation, and then just have some compassion for yourself. I tell people, think of something that you like about yourself. I like the way I love my dog, so that comes in. And it basically, what it does is it just rewires. It takes that physiology of your brain and it shifts at 180 degrees. So you go from fear to kind of a love state, or at least liking state. And then if you do that a number of times a day, you start changing the wiring in your brain. And it also, if you're going to make something certain, make your sensation certain, because that is something you can hang on to. That is something you can bring into the moment. Because if you get lost in the future, there's no foundation in the future. There's no grounding there. So when we get lost in worry, of course we're going to feel completely dissociated because there's no safety there. So it's all about bringing yourself back into the moment. But the problem is your ego dragon is always going to try and pull you into the future because it hates uncertainty so much that it will accept that worry.
That's amazing. The Beatles were right. All you need is love.
Yeah, that works.
And your book, you said it's coming out in the fall.
Yeah, September.
What is the title?
What is the Anxiety RX?
The Anxiety RX. Is there a website right now?
Yeah. My website is the Anxiety MD. And if you Google those three words, the Anxiety MD, I guess MD isn't a word, but the Anxiety MD, you'll be able to find all my stuff. I got a YouTube channel.
Okay, I'll put links to both of those.
Page, all that stuff.
I'll put links to both of those under this video.
And on my website, I've got a free meditation to help support your immune system, relax you through this time, and it's all free. Like I did it when this thing first came out because, you know, I don't want people suffering like I did. That's the reason why I do a lot of this stuff, Dave. It's like there is ways to heal from anxiety that most doctors don't know about, and I think the book is really going to start, you know, shifting how we look at anxiety. And there's a free meditation that includes, you know, the brainwave entrainment as well. There's alpha waves behind it. It's like I'm a bit of a science nerd as well, so I've got this kind of hypnosis, meditation, alpha brainwave behind it, and then it puts people in hypnosis and a meditative state, and it boosts their immune system, and it relaxes you too, allows you to sleep. So there's a lot of things, and it's free. You know, I basically just want to give it to people so that they have something, that they're not just left defenseless these days, because that's the feeling a lot of people have with this virus, is they just feel defenseless.
Yeah, well, and that's amazing that you've done that. And I know people are often quite jaded these days to think that there's some hidden agenda about you giving it away for free. And knowing you as long as I've known you, I know that's not true. I know you could have retired easily many years ago and be sitting on a sailboat enjoying yourself. But I know you're also the type of guy that really wants to help people. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, you do have to kind of log in to create an account on the website to download it. And people are like, oh, you're trying to get my email. The reason you did that is because when people download an MP3 from a website onto a phone, there's nowhere for it to land. So if you have an account on my website, there's a place that will hold that MP3 for you. So that's why I had to do that. I had to make it so that people could, you know, they'd have to sign into the account so that they could able to have access to the MP3s, because all these people were emailing me saying, I've downloaded it, but I can't find it on my phone. So that's the reason I did that. There's no hidden agenda. There's no, like, I'm not going to be emailing you saying, you know, I have this offer or any of that stuff.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Really, really appreciate it. And
anytime, my friend.
Yeah, I look forward to the next time we get to hang out again.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Russ, ladies and gentlemen.